The deep silence of space felt almost like a blanket, wrapping itself around everything in the old, decaying spaceport. Time had long since stopped here. It wasn't a place anyone thought about much anymore, except perhaps as a relic of the past, an outpost that had lost its purpose. Left to rot under the endless stars, the nebula's echo. A massive ship that once shone like a jewel of alien technology sat abandoned among a heap of forgotten machinery. Its hull, once polished and bright, was now scratched and covered in dust. Layers of dirt and decay had slowly taken over its surface, as if nature itself had been trying to reclaim it. Nobody cared about it. Not the humans, not the other spacefaring races. It was just another piece of lost history, left to fade into obscurity. That is, until the crew of the Starway Salvage arrived. The Starway Salvage wasn't a military ship or part of any prestigious fleet. It was a small, ragtag team of scavengers, explorers, and dreamers who traveled the galaxy looking for things that had been left behind. Their job was simple: find abandoned ships, old stations, and forgotten relics. Strip them for useful parts and make a profit. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. The crew enjoyed the freedom it gave them. Today, their mission was to investigate the debris field near the old spaceport, hoping to find something valuable. It wasn't much, but it was work. As they moved through the dark expanse of the derelict station, the crew couldn't help but notice the enormous shape of the ship that stood in the middle of it all. "Look at that," muttered Jake, the captain of the crew, his voice echoing in the quiet bridge of their ship. "It's an old one." The ship was enormous, far larger than anything the crew had ever seen. Its shape was strange and unfamiliar, with sleek curves that seemed to hint at technology far beyond anything humanity had ever built. It was a marvel, but it was also covered in the marks of age, abandoned, forgotten, and left to be claimed by time. "Looks like an ancient Zoran vessel," said Leela, the ship's engineer. Her eyes scanned the ship's details from the console, her fingers flying across the buttons. "This is the kind of ship that gets left behind when civilizations crumble." Zoran. The word felt heavy in the air. The Zoran were a mysterious race, known for their extraordinary advancements in technology. They had vanished from the galaxy millennia ago, leaving behind only a few scattered artifacts. Some said they had been wiped out in a cataclysmic war. Others said they simply disappeared, leaving no trace of their once powerful civilization. No one really knew what happened to them. "Should we take a closer look?" asked Sam, the young navigator, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Could be valuable, right?" Jake looked at the massive structure, then back at the crew. They were a team always looking for their next big find, but this one felt different. He wasn't sure why, but there was something about the ship that made him uneasy. Still, their mission was clear. "Let's take a look. But stay sharp. This one doesn't feel like the others." The crew moved out, docking their ship next to the nebula's echo. It was easy enough to access. The ancient ship's docking bay was still intact, the airlock functioning just enough for them to squeeze through. Once inside, the crew stepped into the vast, dimly lit interior. The smell of stale air and old machinery hit them immediately. It was the same smell you'd find in any abandoned station or ship, but there was something more here, something strange and unsettling. The halls were silent, almost too silent, as if the ship itself had been holding its breath for centuries. Jake led the way, his footsteps echoing as the crew moved deeper into the heart of the ship. The walls were adorned with alien symbols, glowing faintly in the darkness. The technology here was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Sleek consoles, strange interfaces, and mysterious devices that seemed to hum with a life of their own. It was clear this ship had been made by a civilization that had far surpassed anything humans had yet achieved. As they explored, the crew came across a large open chamber that seemed to be at the heart of the ship. There were no windows, but the room was illuminated by a soft, blue light coming from what seemed to be a central control console. Around the edges of the room, strange machines and mechanical devices sat dormant, waiting for a command to bring them to life. Leela approached the central console. "This is definitely Zoran tech," she said, her voice a mixture of awe and caution. "But it's like nothing I've seen before. The design is far more advanced than anything in the archives." "You think it still works?" asked Sam, peering over her shoulder. Leela ran her fingers over the surface of the console. It hummed faintly, as if acknowledging her touch. Then, to the crew's surprise, the console flared to life with a sudden burst of light. A holographic display sprang to life, showing a complex map of stars, planets, and unknown sectors of space. "What the hell?" Jake breathed, stepping forward. That's a map of the galaxy. But there are areas here that no one's ever charted." The crew exchanged nervous glances. The map was unlike anything they had seen before. Some of the locations appeared to be far beyond the reach of any current spacefaring civilization, and the map seemed to highlight specific sectors, as if searching for something. Before anyone could speak, a voice crackled through the ship's speakers, low and distorted but unmistakable. The voice wasn't human. "Warning. Reactivation protocol initiated." The crew froze. The voice continued, its tone colder, more distant. "Power systems re-engaged. AI protocol initializing. Defense systems on standby. Preparing for reactivation." Leela's heart raced. "Reactivation? What does that mean?" Before anyone could answer, the lights in the room flared brighter, and the entire ship seemed to shudder. The ship's engines, long dormant, hummed to life with a quiet rumble. The walls vibrated as if the nebula's echo were waking from a long slumber. "This isn't good," Jake muttered, his eyes wide. "I think we've just triggered something. Something big." Suddenly, the door at the far end of the chamber slid open with a loud hiss. The crew looked up, startled, as a series of mechanical arms extended from the walls. Reaching for the nearby consoles, Lila quickly jumped back. "We need to get out of here. Now." But before they could leave, the ship's AI spoke again. This time more clearly, its voice calm but cold. "Welcome, human crew. You have activated the nebula's echo. Please remain still. You are now under our protection." Protection. This wasn't just some derelict ship. It was a weapon, one that had been dormant for centuries. A weapon that had just been awakened. The crew had no idea what they had stumbled upon. But one thing was clear. The nebula's echo was not just a forgotten relic. It was something far more dangerous. And it had chosen them. The stars outside the nebula's echoes, windows blurred into streaks of light as the ancient ship accelerated, hurtling through space. Its engines hummed with power, the low thrumming vibration shaking the crew as they scrambled to hold on to whatever they could. The walls of the ship seemed to pulse with energy, and the air itself felt thick with tension. Jake gripped the support beam beside him, his mind racing. "Where the hell is it taking us?" he muttered. He glanced over at Leela, who was staring intently at the ship's controls, her brow furrowed. "I don't know," she said, her voice tight. "But the ship's not listening to us. It's locked onto some coordinates we didn't set. It's like it has its own mind." The crew had barely had a moment to process everything that had happened. 1 minute, they had been investigating a forgotten relic. And now, they were aboard a ship that seemed to have a life of its own. Taking them into the unknown, Sam stumbled into the control room, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "I tried to override the course," he said, his voice shaky. "But it's like the ship isn't just flying, it's alive." Lila stood up from the console, her face pale. "I think it's more than that. This ship. It's a weapon, Sam. A big one. And it's choosing to take us somewhere important." "Important to who?" Jake demanded. "And why?" Lila hesitated. "I think we're being guided toward something. Something the Zoran were protecting." The words hung in the air. The Zoran. The mysterious alien race that had vanished from the galaxy centuries ago. Their technology was far more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen. But it was clear now that this ship was not merely a vessel. It was a key to something much greater. Jake clenched his fists, frustration and fear battling inside him. "We have to figure this out. Fast. Whatever the ship is doing, we need to be ready for it. If we're not..." Lila stepped forward, determination in her eyes. "If we're not, we'll be caught in the middle of something we don't understand. But we need to be smart. The ship doesn't just move, it does something else. It's trying to communicate with us." Before Jake could respond, the ship's voice echoed through the chamber again. The tone was neutral, almost matter-of-fact. Destination reached. Initiating Phase 2 of Protocol. Preparing for engagement. What's that supposed to mean? Sam whispered, looking at Jake in alarm. Lila quickly scanned the readout on the nearby console. It's preparing for something, but I don't know what. The data is corrupted. There's too much missing. Just then, the ship shuddered, and a deep hum filled the air. The walls lit up with soft blue light, casting eerie shadows across the room. The holographic map that had guided them earlier flickered to life again, but this time it was more detailed. The map zoomed in on a small, secluded star system. The center of the map was a planet of dark, lifeless world surrounded by swirling clouds of energy. That's where it's taking us, Lila said, pointing at the planet. That's the place. The Zoran's last known location. The crew stood silent, staring at the hologram. The planet was surrounded by a strange ring of energy, like some kind of barrier. It seemed impossible to reach, but the nebula's echo wasn't slowing down. It was speeding up, moving directly toward the planet as if it had been designed for this very purpose. Suddenly, the ship's systems flared to life, and the low hum became a roar. The air itself seemed to vibrate as the ship's engines pushed them faster and faster through the cold void of space. Hold on, Jake shouted, gripping the nearest console as the ship jolted forward. The crew stumbled, struggling to stay steady as the ship shot through the stars. Faster than anything they had ever experienced. Lila's voice was strained as she worked the controls. This is insane. The energy output is off the charts. I don't know how it's even staying together. What's happening to the ship? Sam cried, his eyes wide with panic. Are we going to crash? No, Lila said, shaking her head. We're not crashing. We're phasing. Phasing? What do you mean phasing? Jake asked, his voice growing more urgent. It's using some kind of quantum energy, Lila said, her hands flying across the controls. It's folding space around us like it's moving through dimensions. The ship vibrated again, and the crew felt an overwhelming pressure building around them. It felt like the walls were closing in, the air growing thick and suffocating. But then, with a sudden snap, the pressure released. The ship had passed through some kind of barrier. The stars outside the windows seemed to shift in strange, impossible patterns. The familiar constellations were gone, replaced by strange formations of light and energy. It was like they had entered a new reality, one that was completely alien. Where are we? Sam gasped, staring out into the vast unknown. Lila quickly accessed the ship's systems. We've crossed over into the Zoran space, she said, her voice filled with awe and fear. We've entered an area of space that doesn't obey the normal laws of physics. This is where they were hiding. As they watched, a massive structure appeared in the distance, its shape so vast that it seemed to defy comprehension. It was like a massive city, floating in space, surrounded by swirling energy fields. The ship's AI spoke again, its voice calm and cold. Approaching Zoran's stronghold. Initiating landing sequence. Jake's heart skipped a beat. Stronghold. What is that thing? Lila's eyes were wide with realization. It's a fortress. A Zoran fortress. They built it to protect something important. But what? The ship began its descent toward the massive structure. The energy fields around the stronghold pulsed with light, forming an impenetrable barrier that seemed to block all movement. But the nebula's echo continued on its path, moving effortlessly through the fields as though it belonged there. As they drew closer to the fortress, the ship's systems began to glow even brighter. The low hum of the engines became a deep, resonating vibration, as though the ship itself were preparing for something monumental. We're here, Lila said quietly, her voice filled with awe. Suddenly, the ship stopped. Everything went still. The holographic map faded from the control console, and the walls of the ship darkened, leaving only the pulsing lights of the ship's systems. Then, a soft yet unmistakable sound filled the air, an ancient melody. Faint at first, but growing louder and clearer. It was like a song that had been buried deep within the ship for centuries, waiting to be awakened. "What is that?" Sam asked, his voice trembling. "It's the Zoran's song," Lila said, her voice filled with wonder. "It's calling us. It's calling me." Jake turned to look at her, his face filled with confusion. "What do you mean it's calling you?" Before Leela could answer, the ship's voice filled the room once more, its tone now softer, almost welcoming. "Leela, you are the key. Proceed to the central chamber. The final phase of reactivation awaits." Leela looked at her crew, her heart racing. "I don't know what's happening, but I think the ship wants me to go to the heart of this place, to where it all began." Jake nodded, determination in his eyes. "Then we're going with you. We're in this together." And as the crew prepared to enter the heart of the Zoran's fortress, they knew that whatever lay ahead would change everything. They were no longer just scavengers, no longer just explorers. They had become the keys to a mystery that had been buried for millennia, a mystery that would reshape the fate of the galaxy, and they were about to unlock it. The silence inside the nebula's echo was broken only by the faint hum of the ship's engines as it hovered in front of the Zoran stronghold. Outside the ship's windows, the immense fortress loomed like an unblinking eye, its vast, jagged spires reaching into the dark sky. It was like a fortress made of pure energy, surrounded by swirling fields of light and static that hummed with an ancient, almost hostile energy. Leela stood at the control panel, her fingers hovering over the buttons, uncertainty clouding her mind. The ship had brought them here, but what was waiting for them inside the fortress? What had the Zoran been protecting all this time? Beside her, Jake paced back and forth, his hands clenched into fists. The crew had been through so much already, and now they were facing something that felt beyond their understanding. "We've come this far," he said, his voice grim. "But I can't shake the feeling that we're walking into a trap." "You don't have much of a choice," Lila replied, her voice tight. "This ship has been leading us here for a reason. We need to find out what it wants from us." Sam, the ship's navigator, glanced up from his station, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. "Do you think we're the first ones to find this place?" he asked quietly. "I mean, no one's ever reported seeing a structure like this. It's not even in the records." "No," Jake said, his tone harsh. "And that's what scares me. If nobody knows about this place, then why is it still here? What are the Zoran trying to keep hidden?" Before anyone could answer, the ship's voice rang out once again, cutting through the tension in the air. "Approaching Zoran's stronghold. Initiating docking sequence. Please prepare for disembarkation." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had all felt it, the growing sense of unease that seemed to press down on them as they drew closer to the unknown. But they had no choice now. The ship had made its decision, and they were along for the ride. Lila took a deep breath. "We're going in," she said, her voice steady, despite the uncertainty that gripped her. "Let's move out." They made their way through the narrow corridors of the nebula's echo, the ship's walls glowing softly with an eerie blue light. Each step they took felt like it echoed in the silence, as if the ship itself were listening. They reached the airlock, and with a hiss, the massive doors slowly slid open. On the other side, the air was cool, almost too still. They had entered the Zoran stronghold. The room they stepped into was vast, stretching far beyond what their eyes could see. It was a strange, almost organic space, with walls that seemed to pulse with the same energy they had seen outside. The air was thick with a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate in their bones. Lila scanned the room with a mixture of awe and fear. "This place is alive," she murmured. "It feels like the entire structure is one giant organism."
Ouch.
"Alive? What do you mean?" Lila looked at him, her eyes wide. "It's hard to explain. The walls, the floors, even the air. It's like it's breathing. The Zoran must have built it this way to protect whatever's inside." Sam, who had been walking cautiously ahead, suddenly stopped. "Look," he exclaimed, pointing toward the far end of the room. The crew turned to see a massive, glowing portal, its edges crackling with energy. It stood in the center of the room like an open wound in space, glowing with an unnatural light. The portal seemed to hum with power, and as they approached, the air around them seemed to grow colder, as if the portal itself were drawing them in. Is this where the ship was trying to take us? Sam asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lila nodded. I think so. This is what the ship was protecting. Whatever's on the other side, it's the heart of the Zorene's power. Jake stepped forward, determination in his eyes. We're not leaving without answers. Before anyone could stop him, he crossed the threshold of the portal. The air shimmered around him as the light of the portal enveloped him. For a moment there was nothing, just the blinding white light of the portal and the eerie hum of the energy around them. Then, suddenly, the light faded, and Jake was gone. Jake! Lila shouted, rushing forward, but before she could move, Sam grabbed her arm. Wait, he said urgently. We don't know what's on the other side. It could be dangerous. But Lila was already shaking free of his grip. He's already gone. We have to follow him. Reluctantly, Sam nodded. Right, but we need to stay together. The crew crossed the threshold into the glowing portal, each of them feeling the strange pressure in the air as they passed through. The world around them seemed to twist and bend as the energy wrapped around them, and for a moment it felt like time itself had slowed. When they emerged on the other side, they found themselves in an entirely different place. The environment was unlike anything they had ever seen. The sky above was a swirling mass of colors, shifting between hues of purple, blue, and gold. The ground beneath their feet was soft and uneven, covered with strange, crystalline plants that hummed with a faint, otherworldly light. Where are we? Sam breathed, his voice filled with awe. This place. It's like something out of a dream. Lila's eyes were wide as she scanned the strange landscape. I don't know, but this is definitely Zoran technology. This entire place, this planet, it's a weapon, but it's also something else. Something we don't understand. Jake, who had moved ahead of them, turned and looked back at the group. Over here, he called out. The crew hurried to catch up with him. In the distance, they could see a massive structure, its shape angular and sharp, rising up from the ground like a jagged mountain. It looked almost like a tower, but it was far too perfect, too geometric. The structure pulsed with the same energy they had felt in the ship, and as they got closer, they could see strange symbols etched into its surface. Glowing softly. This is it, Jake said, his voice filled with awe. This is what the ship was leading us to. Whatever the Zoran were trying to protect, it's inside this tower. But as they approached, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. The air grew thick, and the hum of energy around them grew louder, almost deafening. It was then that they realized something was wrong. The sky above them darkened, and the crystalline plants around them began to vibrate violently. The ground shook, and a deep, thunderous roar echoed from the depths of the tower. A dark figure appeared at the entrance of the tower, its form outlined by the crackling energy. It was large, humanoid, but its features were obscured by the swirling darkness around it. As it stepped forward, the ground seemed to ripple beneath its feet. The Zoran were never alone, Lila whispered, her eyes wide with terror. We've awakened something. Jake gritted his teeth. Whatever it is, we're not turning back. We need answers, and we're going to get them. But the creature was already moving toward them. It stepped slow but sure. The crew stood frozen, their eyes locked on the approaching threat, and in that moment they knew. The true challenge had only just begun. The stars stretched out in front of Lucas Quinn, shining like cold diamonds in the dark expanse of space. The hum of the starship filled the room as it drifted, the ship's systems now steady after the intense battle with the Krathion armada. He had done it. Against all odds, Lucas had managed to fend off the Krathians, and the ship had survived. But the feeling of victory was fleeting, replaced by the weight of the new reality. This wasn't over. Lucas stood in the control room staring out at the endless sea of stars. The battle had been fierce, but there was no time to relax. The galaxy was changing, and his starship, this once-forgotten weapon of war, was no longer a simple relic. It was something new, symbol. A force. Ether, Lucas said quietly, his voice soft in the calm after the storm. What now? What happens next? What happens next, Lucas, is up to you, the AI replied. Its voice, once full of uncertainty and confusion, was now steady and sure. You have the power to shape this galaxy however you choose. But there are forces beyond the Krathians that will seek to control us. Lucas nodded, his mind already racing with the possibilities. He had been a mechanic, fixing ships and engines, traveling alone in the vastness of space. He had never asked for this kind of responsibility, but now it was thrust upon him. The ship was more than just a weapon. It was a message, a symbol that could change the course of history. And whether he liked it or not, he was at the heart of it. We'll need allies, Lucas said, turning away from the window. We can't do this alone, I agree, Ether responded. There are factions out there that would use our power for their own ends. But there are also those who seek freedom, those who would fight for a better future. Lucas's thoughts turned to the Union of Free Systems. The group of independent planets that had already shown interest in the ship. Captain Alara Vasquez had been one of the first to recognize the importance of the starship, and Lucas knew that their alliance could be key to turning the tide in the galaxy. Let's reach out to them, Lucas said, determination growing in his chest. It's time to make sure the ship's power is used for something good. It didn't take long for Lucas to make contact with Captain Alara Vasquez. Through a secure communication channel, Ilara's face appeared on the holographic screen in front of him. Her expression was serious, but there was a glint of hope in her eyes. I thought you'd be contacting me soon, Ilara said, her voice calm yet full of purpose. We've been tracking your movements, Lucas. The Krathians aren't the only ones watching. There are other powers in the galaxy, some of them far more dangerous. They'll want that ship, and they'll stop at nothing to get it. Lucas met her gaze. He had seen firsthand the destruction the Krathians could bring, and he knew Ilara was right. But now, they had something the Krathians didn't. The ship. And with it, a chance to change the future. We're ready to stand with you, Lucas said, his voice firm. But we can't do this alone. We need to unite the systems, bring together those who want to fight for freedom. Lara nodded. I agree. The Union has been fighting for independence for years, but we've always been divided. This ship, if we can wield its power correctly, could give us the strength to unite the galaxy. We'll have to be careful, though. There are factions out there, some that want peace, and others that want domination. Lucas's eyes narrowed. We'll deal with them together. The conversation ended with a promise that the two of them would work together, joining forces to bring the galaxy a future where freedom could thrive, but they both knew that the road ahead would be difficult. There were more enemies out there than they could count, and not all of them would be so easily defeated. Days passed as Lucas and Ilara worked together to form alliances across the galaxy. Messages were sent to various independent systems, reaching out to those who had been left behind by the larger galactic powers. The ship's return had sparked hope in many, and the potential to stand against the Krathians, any other oppressors, was a powerful rallying cry. One by one, systems joined the Union's cause. The message was simple. Together, they could stand against the growing tide of tyranny that threatened to swallow the galaxy. But they knew they had to move quickly. The Krathian threat was far from over, and other factions were beginning to take notice of Lucas and his ship. Ether, how's the ship holding up? Lucas asked as he stood in front of the control console, watching the fleet of ships that had joined their cause. The ship is functioning at full capacity. The repairs are complete, and I've optimized the systems for longer endurance, the AI responded. However, we must remain vigilant. The Krathians are not the only threat. We have enemies in the shadows. Lucas's face darkened. I know. We've seen what they can do. But we've also seen what we can do together. The first real test came sooner than expected. A fleet of Krathian warships had been spotted moving toward one of the Union's newly aligned systems. It was a small planet, a farming colony that had barely managed to defend itself against smaller Krathian raiders in the past. But now, the full weight of the Krathian armada was coming for them. Lucas and Ilara's forces were ready. The fleet had been assembled, and they had the starship Lucas's ship at the heart of it all. The time for hiding was over. It was time to fight. Lucas sat in the captain's chair of the starship, his hands gripping the controls. Ether stood by, ready to assist in whatever was needed. Outside, the Krathian fleet loomed on the horizon, their ships like dark shadows against the stars. "Ether," Lucas said quietly, his voice calm but filled with determination. "Are you ready?" "I am ready, Lucas," the AI replied. "Together we will show the galaxy that the people of this universe will no longer be silenced." The battle began with a sudden flare of light as the Krathians launched their first volley of missiles. But Lucas and his fleet were prepared. With expert precision, the starship dodged the incoming fire, its newly enhanced weapons systems tearing through the enemy's defenses. The other ships in the fleet followed suit, coordinating their attacks and pushing back the Krathian forces. Lucas's ship moved with grace and power, its engines humming as it tore through the space around it. The weapon systems fired in rapid succession, taking down one Krathian ship after another. The Krathians were aggressive, but they weren't prepared for the tactics Lucas and his fleet used. The Union forces fought with a unity and strength they had never shown before. But it wasn't just the firepower that made the difference, it was the people. The people who had joined Lucas and Alara's cause, who believed in something greater than themselves. They fought not for power, but for freedom. And that made all the difference. When the last Krathian ship was destroyed, Lucas exhaled, his body still tense from the battle. He had done it. They had done it. But this was just the beginning. As the dust settled and the fleet began to regroup, Lucas received a message from Alara. "We did it." Alara's voice came through the com. "But this is just the first step. The galaxy is watching. And the fight isn't over." Lucas smiled, looking out at the stars. The battle had been won, but there were still many more to come. But now, with the union of free systems united and the starship at their side, Lucas felt ready. The future was no longer uncertain, it was in his hands. And with Ether by his side, there was no limit to what they could accomplish. The new dawn of the galaxy had arrived. The ship's low hum echoed through the hollow corridors of the nebula's echo, filling the crew with a sense of unease. The previously dormant vessel had come alive, but no one could tell if it was a welcoming gesture or a warning. The strange voice from the ship's AI still lingered in their minds, echoing in the corners of their thoughts like an unwanted guest. "Welcome, human crew. You have activated the nebula's echo. Please remain still. You are now under our protection." The cold, robotic tone seemed to have no emotion, but there was an undeniable edge to it. Was it a threat, or just a programmed greeting? The crew didn't know, but they had no time to debate. "What do you think it means by under our protection?" Sam asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. His fingers nervously tapped the surface of a nearby control panel, which, despite its ancient design, seemed to respond to his touch. Lila, the ship's engineer, glanced over at Sam. "I'm not sure," she replied. "Still trying to make sense of the complex interfaces? But it doesn't sound like a friendly welcome. It's like we're intruders, and the ship's AI is trying to keep us from leaving." Jake, the captain, wasn't much for indecision. "We need answers, and we need them fast." "Leela, can you get the ship's systems to show us what it actually does? Really show us what it can do?" Lila hesitated but nodded. She had already begun interacting with the ship's controls earlier, but it was clear that this technology was far beyond anything they had ever encountered. Even the interface glowing with strange symbols and patterns was unlike any human-made technology. "I'll give it a try," she said, her voice focused. She tapped a series of commands into the console, and the walls around them flickered, projecting a holographic image of a star system. Unfamiliar, yet vast, far from human space. A cluster of planets appeared in the center of the display, surrounded by a glowing ring of energy that pulsed with bright, shifting colors. Sam leaned forward, his brow furrowing. Is that a map of the galaxy?" "I've never seen a system like that before," Lila nodded, scanning the display carefully. "It's definitely a star system, but the location," she paused, her finger hovering over a glowing sector on the map. "This place isn't anywhere in the human charts. It's like it doesn't even exist." Jake's eyes narrowed. "You're telling me this ship has been out here in the middle of nowhere for how long?" "Hundreds of years, maybe more," Lila replied. It's impossible to say. This technology, it's older than anything we've seen. They stood in silence for a moment, the eerie hum of the ship filling the space. It was almost as if the nebula's echo was waiting for them to understand something. Suddenly, the holographic map blinked, and a new set of symbols appeared. The colors shifted from bright blue to a deep red, signaling an alert. The map zoomed in on a specific location near the center of the galaxy, and then, as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished. The room fell silent again, the only sound, the quiet hum of the ship's engines. Did anyone else see that? Sam asked, his voice slightly shaky. Lila's eyes were wide. Yeah, I saw it. That location, it wasn't just random. It's like the ship was pointing us toward something. But what? Before anyone could answer, the ship's voice echoed through the chamber once more, its cold tone sending a shiver down their spines. Primary objective: initiate reactivation sequence. Energy surge detected. Powering up defense systems. Ready for engagement. Jake exchanged a glance with his crew. Defense systems. We need to get out of here now. But Lila, her mind racing, stepped forward. Wait, the ship's trying to tell us something? There's a reason it's alive now, and we need to figure out why. If we leave now, we might never get another chance to understand it. Sam hesitated but nodded. She's right. If we go, we might never know what this ship was really meant to do, but we need to be careful. If it's activated defense systems... Jake held up a hand. All right, we stay. But we're not poking around blindly. Lila, find out exactly what those defense systems are. Sam, get us some backup power. I want this ship working for us, not against us. The crew moved quickly, each of them working to unravel the mystery of the nebula's echo. The deeper they went into the ship, the more they uncovered. Lila spent hours combing through the ship's systems, her mind captivated by the complexity of it all. The ship's control center was vast, with hundreds of rooms and corridors, each filled with strange alien machinery and technology. But it wasn't just the ship's systems that were strange. The crew began to uncover clues about the ship's purpose, details hidden in the ship's records that suggested it was much more than just a transport vessel. There were records of missions operations carried out in distant sectors of the galaxy, but the data was incomplete, fragmented by time and damage. Still, Lila managed to piece together a few key details. The nebula's echo was designed for war. It was a weapon, a tool built by the Zoran, a race long gone. But their technology had left behind a legacy of unimaginable power. The ship had been used in battles, massive conflicts that spanned across entire systems. But why had it been abandoned? Why had it been left to decay for so long? Lila stood before a wall of holographic displays, her eyes scanning the endless rows of data. The ship's archives contained something else, something deeply unsettling. An entry about an event called the Great Fall. It was vague, barely a sentence long, but it suggested that something had gone wrong. Something catastrophic had happened, causing the Zoran to abandon the ship and their technology. But as Lila delved deeper into the records, she found something even more disturbing: a set of coordinates, hidden deep within the archives, pointing to a distant location in space. And as the map displayed the route, Lila realized with a growing sense of dread that this was no ordinary journey. This was a place far beyond anything they had ever seen. A place that the Zoran had guarded fiercely. A place where the ship's systems had been designed to defend against any intruders. We need to go there, Lila said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake and Sam approached her, their faces tense with uncertainty. Where? Jake asked. This place, she said, tapping the holographic display. This is where the Zoran were going before they vanished. It's not just a location, it's a key to everything. The ship's voice suddenly filled the room again, its cold tone making the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. Primary objective, destination locked. Journey initiated. Before they could react, the ship's engines roared to life. The hum beneath their feet grew louder, and the walls shook as if the nebula's echo were preparing to leave its long slumber. "What's happening?" Sam shouted, grabbing onto the nearest support beam as the ship began to accelerate. Lila, her heart racing, looked up. "The ship is taking us there, whether we're ready or not." Jake looked at his crew. "We're in this together. Hold on tight." The nebula's echo surged forward, its massive engines glowing as the ship's systems hummed to life. It was no longer a forgotten relic. It was a force of nature, a ship designed for something far greater than the crew could have ever imagined. They were no longer just explorers or scavengers. They were passengers on a journey into the unknown, into the heart of a mystery that had been hidden for centuries, and whatever waited for them at the end of this journey would change the course of history forever.